Hello, my name is Leilani Johnson, and this week I watched the films Spirited Away and Ringu for our exploration into Japanese cinema. Before we review these films, might we dive into the history of anime? Well, I don't care what your answer is. Anime is obviously short for animation, and to Japanese it means just that. However, since Americans are totally weird, when we use it, the term only refers to Japanese animation. It's over 100 years old, and for a long time it was hard to make and therefore hard to get funding to make. In 1963, the first recognizable anime television series, Astro Boy, premiered. They were able to make anime affordable to produce by using many of the techniques American shows such as Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, used, albeit 5 years earlier, such as reusing cells and reducing the number of frames per second, also known as limited animation, because it was cheap. Anime is known for having complex characters and storylines. Characters have very exaggerated hair and eyes, and in general, facial features and expressions. This creates a very distinct look not traditionally found in Western animation. Now on to our films. The first one is Spirited Away. Let me start by saying that all opinions I have of this film are biased, to which I mean this was my third or fourth rewatch, and I've never thought about it in terms of a singular film. I always evaluate it in the context of other Studio Ghibli movies, so I've always compared them. Spirited Away was released in 2001 and came entirely from Hayao Miyazaki, as per usual. The story follows a 10-year-old girl named Chihiro who is moving to a new home. She isn't excited. They make a wrong turn, and her father stops to check out an abandoned amusement park. Chihiro is not happy about this. She thinks it's creepy, but her parents tell her she's being silly, and she comes along. There are lots of abandoned stores and an abandoned restaurant full of food. Her parents eagerly start eating all of the food, despite Chihiro's protests. She leaves them to explore on her own and runs into a boy named Haku, who warns her to leave immediately. She turns back to her parents to find that they've turned into pigs, and there is a lake where the exit was. Trapped, she runs into a bunch of monsters who appear as the sun sets. Haku finds her and helps her get a job with Yubaba, the witch who runs a bathhouse. Through copious trials, she finds peace with the monsters and rescues her parents. Chihiro is the protagonist of the film, and her goal remains the same throughout the movie. She wants to see her parents. She wants to rescue her parents and return home. She also has a secondary goal, to care for Haku when it becomes obvious he's in danger. She succeeded greatly in both of these endeavors, and even helps him restore his memory. There are a few antagonists in the movie. In the beginning, it's Chihiro's parents, who foolishly get themselves and Chihiro into trouble. Then it's Yubaba, who steals Chihiro's name and withholds her memories. Yubaba is the chief antagonist, because she seems to enjoy commanding power over everyone in the bathhouse, and she despises humans, like most of the other spirits. For a few scenes, it is No-Face, a lonely spirit that craves Chihiro's attention and gave me many nightmares as a child. Chihiro is never afraid of No-Face and helps him find a home. My mom and I have always been confused as to why this film achieved such great popularity over the rest of the Studio Ghibli films. It's unquestionably a great film, but it's never been one of my favorites. I love the world building. That's my favorite part. The world Miyazaki creates absorbs your entire consciousness, and you really sympathize with Chihiro's plight. The characters are extremely inventive and unapologetically crazy. So all in all, I would say this is one of the most creative of Miyazaki's films. However, so many of his other films, in my opinion, have more developed characters and more heart. I sympathize with Chihiro's situation, but I don't identify with her. At 10 years old, if I saw No-Face, I would have cried. And I think pigs are the most disgusting things in the universe. Actually, maybe that would have motivated me to turn my parents back. Just my sheer hatred of pigs. Of all the characters, Chihiro is the closest to me, but I'm still not quite there. And this isn't any kind of a diss, it's just not me. I'm not a lot of people. I work at Subway, and one time a younger lady came in with a Spirited Away backpack. I complimented it, and she said she was a lover of Studio Ghibli movies. I said I was too. She said Spirited Away was her favorite, and she looked at me like she expected me to agree. I did not. I said I grew up watching My Neighbor Totoro, and that meant a lot to me. She said she didn't really get that movie, but she had watched almost all of them, and she also loved Howl's Moving Castle. I said that I didn't really get Howl's Moving Castle, and I said my favorite was Castle in the Sky. She said that's the only one she's never watched, but she meant to for a long time. I hope she never watches it, because she sure won't appreciate it. I guess my point is, the lady was a very good example of a typical Western fan of Studio Ghibli. Her favorite movies were Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle. People like Howl's Moving Castle because they think Christian Bale's voice is sexy, and it is, but it leaves me so confused, and I just can't take those leaps because I don't love the main characters. I would just like someone to explain to me why Spirited Away is so popular compared to the other Studio Ghibli movies. That's the end of my rant. Miyazaki's films are always good at communicating broad themes and messages. Chihiro's parents were greedy, and that's why they got turned into pigs. A long time ago, I read how that was a metaphor for Western consumerism, and I thought it made sense. When Chihiro tells her parents not to take the food, her father literally says, "We have credit cards and cash." Yubaba claims her parents deserve to be pigs because they're so greedy, but there's a lot of greed in the bathhouse as well. No Face gives everyone fake gold, and they fatten him up. When they start to get too greedy, he eats them. The only one that doesn't give in is Chihiro. She's the opposite of greedy. She only takes what she needs. All of Miyazaki's films comment on environmentalism, specifically Princess Mononoke. Everyone at the bathhouse thought the river spirit was a stink spirit because the pollution of his river was so bad. Haku is also a river spirit who completely forgot his identity because of Yubaba, but also because his river was destroyed and replaced with apartments. I would say that this story is darker than most Western fairy tales, but most Disney movies were adapted from European fairy tales, and they actually made them a lot lighter than they started out. And still, every Disney movie has to kill off a parent or two by the end. So I would say that a notable difference is in the significance of kami, or spirits. In Miyazaki's films, kami are generally nature spirits. He very much respects nature, and that's not very American now, is it? I think American tales are more comforting, but I like the Japanese ones to mix it up because the focuses are so different. I don't like or dislike anime. It's a very broad term. I like Studio Ghibli movies. I dislike The Night is Short, Walk On Girl. There are so many different kinds of anime and animation styles. I'm sure everyone could find things they like and dislike. Because I've seen this film 3 times, I wasn't confused by anything. It makes a lot of sense to me. Overall, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. It's a very solid movie, but it leaves me longing. I watched it with my friend last time, and she was very excited to watch it because she'd heard all these great things about it. You know, it's a very heralded film. And by the time it ended, she had the exact same reaction I did the first time. She was like, it's over? That's it? Like, it feels like it should be like a trilogy of films, honestly, because they developed the story so much. But I respect them for letting it be. I really do. Now, for our other film, we were given the choice to watch one from the J-horror genre or the kaiju. J-horror is, well, Japanese horror, and kaiju is giant monster-themed horror. I was awfully close to watching Godzilla, just for the fun of it, but I chose Ringu because the story seemed the most interesting by a long shot. Plus, until I got my hair right before college, everybody at school called me the girl from the ring, and I was interested to see my counterpart. I don't really enjoy horror movies, so I was quite nervous. But I read a review that said it was more of a mystery and psychological horror, so I thought it might be okay. Ringu is part of the J-horror movement of Japanese culture. Japanese cinema. J-horror has deep roots in history and oftentimes uses monsters of legend for its monsters. It's horror, usually with supernatural elements. Kabuki and No, 2 traditional forms of Japanese theater, often go for revenge and ghastly appearances. These are the 2 most notable influences for J-horror. Ringu's premise is that there's a tape filled with uncomfortable and strange images that, when watched, you have a week to live. The protagonist is a journalist named Reiko Asakawa who gets involved when her niece dies as the result of the tape. She decides to inflict it upon herself to investigate where it comes from and how to stop it. She and her ex-husband, Ryoji Takayama, team up to try and uncover the truth and stop the curse. The protagonist of the film was Asakawa. She was trying to stop the curse on her by uncovering the truth behind the tape. But once her son, Yuichi, became cursed, she started to value his own life above hers. We do not know if she was successful in saving her son's life, but she was successful in saving hers, for now. There's like 7 sequels, so you're never safe. The antagonist of the film was Sadako Yamamura, a girl whose father pushed her down a well because she had scary psychic powers. Of course. She was left to die, and her rage created the videotape that curses it. All who watch it, unless they copy it and show it to someone else. There wasn't anything necessarily hard to understand, but there were a couple of places where they made leaps of logic that an American film might not do because of an implied understanding of Japanese tradition. I'm specifically thinking of the reasoning behind the tape Sadako made. They found it perfectly believable that Sadako could have made a tape recording full of her rage when she was trapped inside a well, because of the concept of photography. It's actually not a uniquely Japanese concept, but it's not really a common American thought. Photography is the concept of burning images from one's mind onto a film. It's a magical power. So I'm not saying that American films wouldn't do it, but they didn't even remotely. They were just like, oh yeah, she did it. Of course she did it. Of course. I haven't watched very many American horror films. I'm aware. So I am aware that there was a very popular American remake of the movie, but I haven't seen it because I don't usually seek out horror movies. However, I don't mind psychological horror. I'm not a fan of jump scares and gore, which is why I'm not looking forward to our visit to Korean films next week. Jump scares are a truly overused American horror staple. The only horror movie that I can think of that I watched was It Chapter 2, because Bill Hader's in it, and you'd be a fool not to watch it. Which, it was actually pretty darn funny. But jump scares were everywhere in that movie. I liked Ringu because it was a slow build, not a cheap shot. So in general, yeah, I'm not a fan of American horror. This is the only J-horror film I've ever seen, but I totally prefer it, based on this one film that I've seen. I liked the characters, acting, and plot. Asakawa got a little screamy sometimes, but at least it wasn't in English, and I think it's a cultural thing for Japanese voices to get so high. I enjoyed everything about the movie, to my surprise. I would give it an 8 out of 10 for being a little silly, but geez, it's a horror movie. What more can you ask for?